but we are going to. So here's what I'm going to start. This is my slide that says sales is influence, and I hope you're seeing that because you'll hear me say again and again, if you've been in any of my classes before, that our job as sales professionals is to influence folks. And what are we trying to influence people to do? Well, what we're trying to influence people to do is to make good decisions, decisions that are in their own best real estate interest. But once they make a decision, we're trying to influence action, right? Because decision without action is nothing. I had some of you guys know I had spent some time in my previous career as a psychotherapist by training. And one of the things that I learned as a clinician is there's an awful lot of people who have tons and tons of insight. They're real clear as to why their life is a train wreck. They're just not prepared to do anything different about it. And so one of the things that we've got to figure out is how do we influence people to make decisions and then to get into action and do the right thing. A lot of what we're going to talk about today comes from Gary Keller's book Shift. Not all of it. Again, this is a course that I wrote, but some of the key ideas I'm going to reference Shift a few times. And if you haven't read Shift, this is the book that was written when the market really did change back in 2008, and we kind of went into a shifted universe. So some of the strategies come from here, but it starts with this Gary Keller quote, and it's an important truth. He says, what a house is worth is a value question. What a house will sell for is a sales question, and they're different. One of the things we're going to talk about today is, as an agent, the things that we do or don't do, and the way that we can influence a seller to do the right things will determine whether or not it will sell for market value or not. Because the two are different. And here's just what I'm going to throw into the mix. What a house will sell for is determined by how effectively an agent creates exposure and a sense of urgency with the right set of buyers. Now, the right set of buyers is an interesting thing because there's a lot of different things now, ways that we can try to determine who is likely to be the right buyer for this home. There's a lot of ways that companies are using predictive analytics and starting to just gather lots and lots of big data and start to determine based on that data, who is the likely buyer? Where would they be? Why would this be the likely buyer? Think about things like if you've got a starter home in a community, a lot of times what they start to think about is, okay, who would likely buy a starter home in this community? Where are the local employers that people would likely be commuting to? How far would be a reasonable commuting time? What companies might they be working for? What income level would they have to be at in order to afford the mortgage on this home? And they use all this big data and start to find lots of ways to help agents kind of really hone in on who is the buyer that I'm trying to get my marketing in front of. Right now, you pay for that service. But my point is, what a house sells for really comes down to how effectively we do that as an agent, right? So it gets back to basics, and we're going to get right back into some supply and demand questions today. These are really the basics of any market. And, the thing you have to understand about pricing a home is there is a window of opportunity curve. And this is the visual here. This comes right out of Shift. It's a graphic that comes right out of Shift. And what this shows here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks. This is 2 months' time. And what you see here in this curve is interest. There is a short window of when this home is interesting to the market. It makes a splash. It's new. And your very best opportunity to get market value or the very best price in terms is right here in the beginning of this curve. And if you look at it, this is not as big a curve as a lot of sellers would like to think. This is by about 2 weeks' time, a week or two, 10 days. The market has seen this house, and it's made some decisions initially in terms of what it thinks. And then its interest starts to dissipate. And by the time you get to week 4 and week 5 and week 6 and week 7, the market has lost interest. So the reason why I start with this window of opportunity is part of what we have to think about from a pricing strategy is how do I get it right out of the gate? Because I can't price it too high in the hopes of adjusting down later. What we'll see and what the data will show overwhelmingly is that if you are not under contract within 3 weeks, you missed it. Now, I know we take listings for 6 months. And sometimes at some really high price points, some luxury price points, we take listings for a longer time because we have this belief that higher priced homes don't sell as quickly. I may need to take this listing for a year. What the data that I'm going to share with you will show overwhelmingly is at all price points, if you've priced it right, you should be under contract within about 3 weeks. And that's really important for us because it really gets us to think about how quickly do we need to make a correction if the market doesn't respond in the way that we hope. And the answer is quickly. This is not a let's try this price for 30 days and see what happens. By the time we're at 4 weeks, the market has lost interest. And what you will see is that if we're wrong, the overcorrection that we're going to have to make in pricing to get the market's interest again will cause the seller to take less money at the closing table than they would have had they been right in the first place. So this is the first graphic, just conceptually I want you to think about, is this activity window is about 3 weeks, right? Now, there's another thing that you have to think about, and it's really relevant to our market right now, and that is the emotionality of markets. Markets move through emotional cycles. All markets do. This is not exclusive to the housing market. But what happens in the emotionality of a market cycle is it starts with this baseline of optimism. And as buyers get more excited, their energy level goes higher, their emotions go higher. It becomes exciting. This is a great opportunity. I'm thrilled by the great opportunity. I hit this peak euphoria, right? And guys, that's where we are right now. I'm going to show you some data in a little bit. But that's where we are right now. Demand is so strong. Supply is so limited. Money is so cheap to borrow that buyers see this as an amazing opportunity. They are excited to buy. And one of the things that happens in emotionally charged markets is buyers behave stupidly. I don't know how else to say it. Buyers behave irrationally. That's probably a better word. And they're acting based on emotion rather than logic. And it becomes a very, very difficult market to be successful in. It becomes a very difficult market to try to price a home in, because all of your comps, you're going to see many of the comps were set in an emotionally charged market, and we don't have any idea whether or not the current market is going to feel the same way. What happens is this. Once you get past that emotional fever pitch in a market, buyers begin to cool off and say, hey, wait a second. This is getting crazy. These prices are just getting so high. And I'm not willing to pay so much anymore. And they pull back. They start to become anxious. They start to kind of deny that this is a good thing to do. They start to become afraid and they pull back. And what we see in every market cycle is this sort of euphoric buying spree. And then, oh my God, what is going on? This is crazy, a pulling back. We need to know where we are in this market cycle because it has everything to do with what a seller can reasonably expect in terms of price. We happen to be right at the top, which means in the market that we're in today, sellers are likely to get better prices than they're likely to get as soon as this market starts to cycle back downward again. And what we saw in the market of 2008, 2009, 2010, when the housing market really went bust, what we saw is buyers just pulled out. They said, I'm afraid to buy in a market like this. Why would I buy a house today for $450,000 when 3 months from now it's going to be $425,000? I'm just going to wait. I'm going to wait until we get to the bottom, and then I'm going to jump in. And the challenge with that philosophy is that it's really hard to gauge where the bottom is. The only way you know that you've hit the bottom, which is the maximum buying opportunity, the only way you know that you're there is when it starts to go back up again, right? Because now you can see where that is. The good news and the bad news for us right now is we recognize that markets go through these emotional cycles. And the good news for sellers is we are at the tippity top here of the emotional euphoria of buyers. It will not last. At some point, when COVID starts to get under control, at some point when interest rates start to go back up again, at some point buyers are going to say, enough. I'm not getting involved with 27 bids on a house and paying $1,500, $15,000 over asking price or whatever it is, right? So it's just an important thing to think about as we approach this idea. Now, we want to talk about comps because the thing about picking comps in a market like we're in right now is that if the buyers are behaving in a way that is driven by emotion, if we get comps that are too old, that are not pulled from a time when the emotion was similar to the one we're in right now in the market, the numbers that those comps reflect may not translate well into the market that we're in. Does that make sense? I want to, most of you are off video. If you can get on video, that'd be great. If you can't, that's okay too. But I just want a thumbs up or some sort of, I want to make sure you understand that concept. Okay. And so here's the thing, when you're pulling comps, we're going to talk about what makes a good comp in a moment. When you're pulling comps, really the very best practice is try to get everything that you need within the last 30 days. I'm looking for about 3 sold comps that are similar. I'm looking for 3 under contracts that are similar. I'm looking for 3 active properties that are similar. I'd probably like to see 3 expireds. I think it's important to look at properties that didn't succeed. And as blazing hot as today's market is, there's no reason at all why anyone should expire. But if you can get all of those within a 30-day range, what you can trust is that those reflect activity that's more similar to the emotionality of today. If I go back and just set and say, find me everything within the last 6 months or last 12 months, there's a really good chance that I'm going to find a house that physically is a really good comp, but because it's so old, that price was set at a time in the market that doesn't reflect the same level of emotion that's driving the market today. Does that make sense? So always think concentric rings. If I can get everything in 3 months, in a 1 month, great. If not, I'll go to 2 months. If I need more, I'll go to 3 months. I'll go to 4 months. I'll go to 5 months. But I will not start by saying, show me everything within 6 months. Just do one ring at a time. Okay. All right. What makes a good comp? Real quick. What is a comp? Well, comp stands for comparative property or complementary property or something that just says it's similar, right? And so the things that we're looking for in good comps are location first, right? We've got to have properties within the same geographic area. And when I say geographic area, I do mean town. We can't be pulling comps. If I'm doing a CMA for a home in Ridgewood, I can't be pulling comps from Glen Rock. I can't be pulling comps from Paramus. Even though the house may be exactly the same, the communities have different amenities, they have different tax structures. A licensed appraiser has an adjustment guide that says if the only comp I can find is in a different town, how would I adjust that? But we don't have that. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to stay within the same town. Second thing we're going to do is try to stay within the same neighborhood if we can, because inside certain towns, some neighborhoods are seen as more desirable than others, right? So location counts. We start with location. We think about the size of the home. And we don't get caught up in this area as much about price per square foot. Why? Because our homes are just too dissimilar. If we were doing pricing in a tract development in Houston or Las Vegas or Phoenix, where the builder came in and built 5,000 homes, 3 models, then those homes are so similar that it's easy to come up with kind of a price per square foot because the homes are so similar. But when you walk up and down your own streets in the towns where we're doing our work, you're going to see a 1930s colonial right next to a split level, right next to a bi-level, right next to something. And they're just so dissimilar, right? That price per square foot doesn't really work for us. If you're in a condo market, a townhouse market, I think it could. Certain townhouse communities, there's 2 models. There's an interior unit, there's an exterior unit, and the square footage is all the same. The amenities are roughly the same. That makes more sense. But for us, we don't think price per square foot as much as we think of total square footage, right? A 3,000 square foot home, you want to try to find something of about 3,000 square feet and not 4,000 or 2,200. Does that make sense? Amenities, are the amenities similar? Is the condition similar, right? All those things, we're trying to figure out, how can I find a home that is similar as possible to my subject property when I do my CMA? And what we've got to learn how to do is how to make adjustments, because even though you find homes that are similar, they're not exactly the same. You're going to find that you've got a subject property, which is a colonial style home with a 2-car attached garage and a full but unfinished basement, That's your subject. And you go out and find a comp that is a colonial style home of about the same age with a 1-car garage and a full basement that is finished. It's similar, but it's not exactly the same. So what we have to learn how to do is, how do we make adjustments, right? How do we adjust? What would I adjust for? Well, here's the thing. And this is what you have to remember. You cannot change your subject property. You never make an adjustment to your subject. It is what it is. We always adjust the comp to make it more similar and more exactly a match to the subject. And the way we think about it is these two acronyms. I want you to think about, write these down, just memorize them. CBS, like the TV station or the radio station. It stands for, if the comp is better, then I've got to subtract value from it. If the comp is better, subtract, CBS. And so in the instance that I gave you, my subject property had an unfinished basement and a 2-car garage. The comp has a 1-car garage, but a finished basement. Which one's better? Well, the finished basement's better than the unfinished basement. The 2-car garage is better than the 1-car garage. We've got to figure out what are the values of these items and make the appropriate adjustments. Does that make sense? If the comp is better, subtract value. If the comp is poorer, the CPA, just like the accountant, this is the acronym. If the comp is poorer, we've got to add value to it in order to make it more like our subject. And guys, there's an adjustment guide that you can get your hands on. And if you can take a class. Jeff Otto and the Otto Appraisal Group teaches how to do this, how to make these adjustments. And if you take Jeff's class, which he does online right now during Zoom, they'll give you this guide. And what this guide does is it says, after we've studied thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of New Jersey real estate closings, how do we kind of figure out what are the values of these things, right? And it breaks it down. If you look at this, in the $250,000 price bracket, $400,000 price bracket, $750,000, $1,250,000, and $2.5 million and above. And then it starts to look at what are some of the different adjustments, the most common ones. Let's go back to garage for a second, because I used that in my example. What's the value of a garage? Well, if we go here in a $250,000 price range per car, if it's attached, it's worth about $3,000. In the $400,000 price range, it's worth about $8,000. In the $750,000 price range, it's worth about $13,000. And so if I'm adding that value or subtracting that value, right, that is determined by whether the comp is better or worse. But a guide like this gives you a benchmark of how much should I adjust. Because when we get into this pricing conversation with sellers and we're comparing apples to apples, we need to adjust the comps before we review them so that we really have a clean and accurate comparison. Does that make sense? I'm going to tell you guys, if you learn how to do these adjustments, you're just going to get some listings, because people are like, Sebastian, dude, you're the smartest agent that's come so far, because like nobody else did this math and adjusted stuff. Everybody else just showed me the picture of the house and told me what it sold for. But you actually took the time to go in and say, yeah, but we had to adjust certain values to make it more accurately reflect yours. You're going to win some listings just because they think you're the most thorough guy that they've spoken to. But it's really, really critical, because if we don't make these adjustments, what will happen is the information that it gives us will be misleading. And if you want to learn how to do this, go watch Larry Gruber in the Ridgewood Market Center. If you don't know Larry, probably one of the best, smartest guys when it comes to how to do CMAs. And he's recorded probably, I don't know how long. Yeah, it's 2 hours, 2 hours and 10 minutes. It's a 2-hour session on how to log into the New Jersey MLS, find comps, adjust the comps using the Otto guide. He really walks you through it in a really detailed way. And if you have some time, go watch Larry show you how to do that. Learning how to do that skill is really critical. Here's the question, though, and this is the $64,000 question. It comes right from Gary Keller, Shift, page 142. As soon as the CMA helps us come up with what we think the market price is, as soon as market price has been established, the question every seller must then answer is, What should my asking price be? This is a strategic question, not a value question. What a house is worth is a value question. What it will sell for is the answer to a sales question. When sellers go to price their property, two things matter. Number one, where is the market right now? And number two, where is the market going? This is the art part, right? This is the art and the science of pricing. So again, two things we've got to think about. Where's the market now? Where's the market going? In terms of emotion, in terms of demand, in terms of all those things. And so our job in pricing a home is to ask this question: what would be the price that would ignite buyer activity in the market that we're in right now? What would be the price that, if we have that 3-week kind of a window, we've got 3 weeks of peak activity, what price is it going to take so that the buyers get really interested within 3 weeks? Because we don't have time to wait a month and try to correct, right? So the other thing that I would say around this is, once you determine some of this about the market and the demand of the market, and I'm going to show you how to calculate this in a moment, it really raises some risk management questions. When the market is screaming hot and there is a lot of demand, sellers can be a little bit more risky in their pricing. They can maybe get a little bit greedier in their pricing, not too greedy, but in a market where there's a lot of demand, sellers can take a chance. Sellers can ask buyers to take on more risk in order to get their home because there's a lot of demand. You want my house? There's 7 people who are bidding on it. If you want it, you're going to have to put some limits around what kinds of requests you're going to make in home inspections. If you want my house, you're going to have to put some limits on what happens if this price doesn't appraise. You're going to have to take more risk, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, just by virtue of the fact that you're going to have to pay in a multiple bid situation what sometimes is a really crazy price. I taught this class this morning in Montclair. And again, I was talking to one of their agents recently who had sold a home in Clifton just within the past few weeks. And the home went on the market in the force. It had, in 48 hours, I think she said that there was 27 offers. 27 offers. And it sold for, well, she didn't tell me exactly, but she said it was over $100,000 over asking. $100,000 over asking in a $400,000 home. Guys, that's an indefensively crazy thing for a buyer to do. But if you have a buyer that really wants the home and says, I'm willing to take that risk because this is my forever home. I'm not moving. I want to live here forever. The money now is cheap enough at these interest rates. I can do it. I want it. People will do it, right? So part of when we start to figure out the strength and the heat of the market is it allows us to start to have a risk management conversation. How much risk are we going to require of the other side? How much risk do we have to take on our side in order to get this done? And guys, if you're representing buyers, it's a real hard conversation right now because they're going to have to take more risk. They're just going to have to. They're going to have to pay more money. They're going to have to put more risk on their side of the equation. So how do we figure out what's what? Well, there's 3 kinds of markets. There's a buyer's market, there's a seller's market, and there's a balanced market, right? And in practice, shift to page 141, what Gary Keller says is, in practice, we really only think about buyer's markets and seller's markets. And the reason we take balanced markets out of the table is because balanced markets are transitional markets. They don't stay balanced for long. Markets tend to favor buyers or tend to favor sellers, but they don't stay balanced for long. Think about it like a seesaw. On the left side here, we've got a market where there's very few buyers and a lot of inventory, right? That's a buyer's market. Look what happens to prices in that market. Prices come down, right? Because if there's a lot of if there's a lot of inventory and nobody wants it, in order to get somebody interested, I got to just lower my price. The other kind of market that we're in right now, which is a seller's market, where there's lots of buyers, very little inventory, prices go up and up and up. That's the kind of thing we're in right now. But you'll never see a seesaw if you walk past the playground just sitting perfectly balanced. It's going to be one way. It's going to be the other way. And the way that we figure it out, the most reliable way is through a calculation that we call the absorption rate. I've talked about this in Ignite and some other classes, but I just want to ask anybody just to make sure we're clear on what this means. What is an absorption rate? Does anybody know? We don't teach this in real estate school. So if you didn't learn it, that's fine, because we're going to learn it today.
I think it's how many months.
Go ahead.
How many months will it take for all the properties in that market to sell?
You know what? You nailed it. I've asked that question in a lot of classes, and very rarely do I have it nailed as well as you just did. It is how long would it take, not just for one house, but for every house to go? It's like if I spilled my soda on the ground and I put a paper towel on it, the paper towel absorbs that water, or that soda, and that's the absorption rate. It's at the current rate of sales, at the current pace that things are selling. How long would it take for everything to sell? And here's what happens. When we do that math, and I'm going to give you the equation in a minute, we refer to it in terms of months of inventory. So here's how the math goes. I'll come back to this slide. The way we do this is we count up all of the active listings in the market, and we divide it by the number that have gone under contract in the same market in the last month. And so if, to make the math easy, at 1:30 on a Thursday afternoon, if there's 100 homes in the market, and in the last month there's 25 that went under contract, I divide 100 by 25, and my answer is 4. What does that mean, 4? Well, what it says is if it's 25 a month, in 4 months, all 100 homes should sell. Now, it's a theoretical, right? Because some of those homes are really pieces of garbage. They're never going to sell. And some of the buyers will pull their home on the market, and new things will come on the market. It's a theoretical idea. But the concept is, at that rate of sales, in 4 months, everything goes. And if it was 100 homes, but only 10 went under contract, 100 divided by 10 is 10. Now my absorption rate is 10 months. And you'll sometimes hear people refer to it as there's 10 months of available inventory or 6 months of inventory. That's what they're referring to. Now, a couple things that you need to know about this. It is price band specific. What does that mean? That means that in every community, there's probably an entry-level price point and a mid-level price point and an upper-level price point, maybe a luxury price point. And they don't all sell at the same rate. Generally speaking, the lower entry-level price points have a lot of turn. The higher price points move slower. In order to get this calculation figured out, which we will need to share with sellers so we can help them think about pricing. This is a pricing class. We have to kind of think about where those price bands are naturally. So one of the things I'd encourage you to think about is, what market am I working in? And where is that price band? Steph, can I pick on you for a second? What town are you working in? By the way, your Christmas tree looks pretty. I like it.
Thank you.
What town are you focusing on?
Washington Township, Westwood.
All right. So if I wanted to get a home in Westwood, entry level in Westwood, which I probably would because Kimchi Smoke is my favorite barbecue place. What would be the cap of an entry level price point in Westwood? How high would I go to be entry level still?
Probably, I'd say about 450, between 450.
If I wanted to sell that entry level home and I wanted to stay in town and kind of take a step up, what would that price band look like? 450 to what?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, if I was selling that entry level home as a seller, I wanted to stay in Westwood, and I just kind of wanted to take the next step up into kind of the next band, the next step up home.
Okay.
What would that price band look like? 450 to what?
I'd say probably 650.
All right, 650. And if I got a new job and a pay raise and life was good and I said, I just kind of want a cooler, bigger house, can I do bigger in Westwood than 650?
Yeah. And I mean, there are certain neighborhoods that have, like you mentioned before, the band of neighborhood. There are certain neighborhoods, both in Washington Township and Westwood, that have larger homes.
And I could go 650 to pick a number, right? Could I get up?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen them up to a million and over.
Yeah. And so here's the thing. If we just do the absorption rate for Westwood by itself, and we say count all the homes in Westwood and all the homes that went under contract in Westwood in the last 30 days, we get one number. However, if my subject property was an entry-level home, there's a chance if I really said, show me everything in Westwood up to 450 that is on the market right now, divide that by things up to 450 that went under contract in the last month, that absorption rate could be different, right? Because when you have all those price bands in together, there's a chance that the higher end market is moving slowly, the bottom end market is moving quickly. And unless we pull these price bands out and calculate absorption separately, we get a distorted number. Does that make sense? Right? Really important that we do that. What did Gary say? Gary said, once we understand market value, now we've got to pick a price. And what matters is where's the market now and where is it going? The absorption rate tells us where it is now. Because once we do that math, I'll come back to that slide. Here's what we know. 5 to 6 months of absorption is kind of that balanced market. It's a transitional one. It's kind of the fulcrum on the teeter-totter. It doesn't stay there for long. But the lower that number goes, the hotter the market is for sellers. If I have 100 homes for sale, 25 of them go under contract in a month, my absorption rate is 4. But if 50 of them go under contract, if I have twice as much demand, now my absorption rate is 2. If all of them sell in a month, my absorption rate is 1. The lower that number is, the better it is for sellers. The higher the number goes, the better it is for buyers. And so we constantly, in order to be really hyper-local market experts in our market, we need to know where is our market today and where is it going. One of the things that we have to do is we have to calculate a trend line. We should be calculating these numbers in our target markets twice a month. I would pull out your calendar on your phone. I would put yourself a reminder in it. Calculate it on the 1st, do it again on the 15th, do it again on the 1st, do it again on the 15th every month by price band. Because what will happen is once you see that absorption rate and you've got data point number 1 and data point number 2, and then next month we had data point number 3 and data point number 4, now you start to be able to draw a trend line and you can start to get a feel for not only where is the market today, but where is it going, right? That is the critical thing in order to price accurately is, are we pricing it with an eye to where things are going, right? Was it Wayne Gretzky who said any skater can skate to where the puck is? What a great skater does is skates to where he thinks the puck is going to go, right? Now, you can pull absorption rates out of your MLS. I don't encourage you to do it because I don't like the way they calculate it. What the MLSs tend to do is they don't count absorption rate by under contracts. They count it by closings. They look at how many actives are in the market, and then they say how many closed in the last month. And the reason why I don't like that as much is because something that closed in the last 30 days, the decision to buy that house happened 60 days prior, right? The meeting of the minds happened 2 months earlier. And I'm really trying to get a feel for the emotion of the market today. The under contracts are closer to today. And I know that not all of them are going to close. Some of the deals are going to fall apart. But I know the fish took the bait. That's what I'm looking for, right? So what the New Jersey MLS does, which I really don't like, is they don't just look at what closed in the last 30 days. What they do is they say, show me everything that closed in town in the last 12 months, divided by 12 to come up with your monthly rate of sales, and use that number in this calculation. And the reason why I don't like that the most is because if I take 12 months worth of data and divide it by 12, what it implies is every month has the same number of closings. And you and I both know that that is not the way the housing market works. It is a seasonal market. Some months there's a lot of closings. Some months there's less closings. You do it this way, which means you're going to have to do it yourself. And you're going to have to just get a book or a spreadsheet, and just every two times a month, it takes 5 minutes, go out there and calculate it and put it in. But when you have this, and you can see the trend of where the market is going. Is it heating up? Is it cooling down? Now you're in the best position to really interpret the CMA numbers and come up with a strategy. Any questions about absorption before we move along?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead, bring it on.
How do you, or where do you get those figures to know what to calculate?
That was a great question. Here's how you do it, Helen. You belong to the New Jersey MLS?
Yes.
All right, what you're going to do is you're going to go in the MLS, you're going to do a quick search, and let's just pick Paramus. You're going to say, show me everything that's active. I'm not going to look at any other status but active. And you probably would do in order to do the price band, right? If you decided that the entry level price band was up to 400,000, you would say, show me everything. And then when it says price, and there's a minimum and maximum, show me everything up to 400,000. And you just hit the button that says count. And it'll tell you how many are there. And then you go to the next price band between 400 and 600, hit count, and you find out how many are there. And you get all of your actives by price band. And then what you do is you change the status from active to under contract. And there's a little drop down that says in 1 day, in 1 week, in 1 month, change it to under contract in the last 1 month and go back and do the same thing again. And you'll come up with your under contracts in the last month. You come up with your current actives and you just do the division yourself. Does that make sense?
Okay, so just look at under contracts, don't include the sales.
I don't want closed.
Okay.
I don't care about closed. What I want to know of is, are the fish biting right now? I'm going to use this fishing analogy because in my mind it works. If I'm going to go fishing, I want to find out, are the fish hungry or are they not hungry? And if they take the bait, even if I can't reel them into the boat because my line snaps, even if the deal fails, I know they were hungry enough to take the bait, and that's what I'm trying to figure out. Make sense?
Yep.
All right, let's keep moving along here. I did absorption rate for some of your towns this morning, and I did the entire town. I did the town where our market centers are located. It may not be the town that you're doing your business in, but the town where the market centers are located, I did not separate price band. But here's what I found. In Rutherford, the absorption rate is 1.24 months. In Ridgewood, it's 1.25 months. In Woodcliff Lake, it's 2 months. In Tenafly, 3.5 months. Fort Lee, 4.8 months. All of these are squarely in the seller's market range. Rutherford and Ridgewood in the stupid range. Guys, when we were in the run-up to the housing meltdown of 2008, we saw absorption rates in the 3s. I'm looking at them in the 1s. A market with absorption rates in the 1 point anything is a market that is so hot, it says everything in town should be gone in a month. You better act quickly. When there's that kind of demand, it becomes a very emotional market, a harder market to price in. When it's that kind of a demand, sellers can get a little greedy, not too greedy, but they can get a little greedy because the buyer demand is there, right? And this is just, I want you to see where we are today. If you're working with buyers and you're trying to sell in these towns, you have to really have a careful risk calculation conversation that says, look, with this much demand, what are you going to do to make your offer better? If you can't go up in price, how can you make it look better? How can you assume more risk? Will you put limits around home inspections? Will you waive appraisal contingencies, right? Here's the thing that happens in a seller's market like we are in right now. The demand pushes the price up. And so what the seller wants, sometimes they hold out and say, yeah, but with demand being what it is, maybe I can get more, maybe I can get more. And sometimes they can't. Here's what Gary says from Shift. A rising market can actually forgive a small overpricing if the property is highly desirable, but it will never forgive a big mistake. It'll forgive a small one, but it will not forgive a big one. And how big is too big? Well, here we're going to get to that. But the thing you have to think about is the way buyers think. Buyers are always going to comparative shop. We think about this in the market, out of the market continuum. We think that the way buyers think about value is price, condition, and location, right? The one thing I can't change here much is location. I can't move this house. I mean, I could, but it's not practical. So it is where it is. On this end of the continuum here is the price continuum. At the bottom is the houses that are the lowest price. At the top is the houses at the highest price. On this axis is the condition. On this end is the very best condition. On this end is the poorest condition. For the location that we're in, the houses that are the lowest price and the best condition are the ones that are really in the market. That's the one everybody wants. That's the one that has all that market urgency behind it, all that bidding war power behind it. If the houses are priced out really high and the condition is really bad, they're out of the market. Nobody's seeing them. Nobody's coming to them, right? That's a dangerous place. Now, in a market like we're in, with demand as high as it is, there's more homes that are going to be in the market. This gets pushed out a little bit because in order to get one, you might have to pay more money. In order to get one, you might have to accept not the best condition. More houses make the cut of being in the market in a blazing hot market. But when the market shifts, when the emotion cycles back around again and buyers start to cool off, less houses are going to make that cut. Here's the kind of interesting spot. Here's the danger zone. We call it no man's land. Maybe my price is good, but my condition isn't so good. Maybe my condition is great, but my price is too high. People are coming and looking at it, but when they look at the other one that's really in the market, they see that that's the one where there's value. That's the one that they buy. And that's a dangerous place. No man's land is the worst spot to be. Our job in thinking about pricing is how do we get them to put it in the market, right? How do we get them to put it in the market? And guys, the only things that they can control on their end, they can't move it. They could improve the condition. In most instances, that's too cost prohibitive to do in a short term. The only thing they can do is price it right. And so, but the thing we have to understand what buyers do, the way buyers think, because if we're going to help sellers price it right, we got to get in ahead of a buyer. Buyers will use the sales comps to kind of use it as a reference point in terms of what makes sense. But the only thing they comparison shop against is where else can they buy today? They compare against the actives. One of the things that's really important when we do our CMAs is we use the data, we interpret the data. I'm going to give you some calculations on that data in just a few minutes. But then whenever we come up with where we think the market value is, the next step is where should we price it? We've got to price it against the actives so that we are best bet when looking against the actives. Because I can look at a number and say, based on these comps, I think that the house should be $400,000. But when you look at what's currently on the market, if there are homes that are better than you for $375,000, then $400,000 is not right. The data can be deceiving when the emotions shift. Your comps could have been set at the pitch of emotionality where buyers were willing to pay stupid high prices. Now buyers have come back to their senses a little bit, and the actives reflect more what buyers are willing to do. Your comp doesn't make sense anymore. You see how that could happen, right? So we use the comps, but we price against the actives and put the bait where we expect the fish to bite. Now, here's the rule. 5%. This guy right here, Jeff Otto, I mentioned his name before. He's the guy who created the appraisal guide, the Otto Appraisal Group, located here in New Jersey. Arguably the housing expert in New Jersey. And he does what's called a right pricing study. And he does it regularly. In the most current right pricing study, what they've done is they analyzed 14,400 sales of New Jersey properties at all different price points. This is not just speculative saying, I kind of feel like this is what my hunch is. No, this is crunching the data on 14,000 homes. And what they found was if you price the home initially within 5% of where it finally sells, if you put the bait right where the fish are going to take it, you're going to sell quicker and for more money than if you try to leave too much wiggle room in there. And it's counterintuitive because sellers always say, I want to start just a little bit higher because I don't want to go too low. Because if I go low, what happens is I'm going to get lower offers. And what the data shows again and again and again is if you price it a little bit lower but accurate, you don't have to come off your number because the buyers recognize that's the value and they come up to it. By building in wiggle room, we end up hurting ourselves. And here's what the data shows. I'm going to show you, here's these slides. This is his data. And this has been done again and again and again. And I've studied it in different MLSs. The data is always the same. In the price band, 300,000 to 500,000 in New Jersey, if you price it in this price range within 5% of where it should be, your expected time on market is 23 days. Your list to sale retention is 98%. If you're wrong, meaning you priced it more than 5% above where it finally sold, your days on market goes all the way up to 74 days. Your list to sale retention drops all the way down to 91%, but let's make these real numbers. What real numbers say is if you priced it right, the average would have been 387, you would have got 380. If you just tried to give yourself a little bit more negotiating room and priced it at 399, because you didn't get the emotion charge of the market in that window, and now you were way outside of that window of opportunity, what you really settled for on average was 363,750. You actually lost $16,000 by pricing it too high. Next price band, 500 to 750. Same idea. If you priced it right, 22 days on market, 99% retention. If you were wrong, 5% off or higher, 78 days on market, 91% list retention. The actual premium is a $20,000 net money left on the table. This is real money lost. $1 million to $2 million. People tell me all the time, well, the luxury market doesn't sell quickly. I have to take this listing for 12 months. If you priced it right, the data shows, and guys, this is thousands of homes. 21 days, 3 weeks. List to sell retention, you got your price, 100%. If you just tried to give yourself a little bit more wiggle room, 76 days on market, 90% retention, 27,000 real dollars left on the table. This is data. This is evidence. This needs to be shared with your sellers because this is the way you start to counteract. Oh, but can't we just try it a little bit higher? Yeah, you could, but this is what will happen. And it's not my opinion. This is data. This is analysis. It's done again and again and again, and it always comes out the same way. We've got to get this maximum activity in this 3-week window. We've got to be right. And so here's the question. We pull our comps. We adjust our comps. We have a price in our mind that we think is where we want this thing to be listed at. This is what I think it should be at. And what we do is we ask this question of our sellers, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, after looking at the information revealed by these comps and thinking about how your home compares, and with an understanding of the dynamics of the marketplace, as we've discussed it, right? Here's the question. What do you think would be a fair price to list your home for? And that is a very strategic use of language. What do you think would be a fair price? I am not asking, now that we've looked at these comps, what would you like to list your home for? Because I know you want to list it for more money than it's worth. Everybody does. But I specifically ask, if you look at this data, what do you think is fair? Because here's the thing. People like to see themselves in their own self-image as inherently fair people. That sits well with our sense of who we are. We don't like to see ourselves as poor moral actors in the world. When you ask, what do you think will be fair? You will get a very different answer than what would you like, right? You ask it in this way. And here's the thing. We have a price in mind because we're in the market. We study the market. We're tracking the absorption rate. We're getting a feel for, is this emotion heating up? Is the emotion cooling down? What are the comps showing? What is my gut telling me? This is the art, right? But when we get the number that we think is right, we're going to give them a 5% window. If you're willing to list it within 5% of the number that I think is right, green light, let's sign the papers, let's move on. 5 to 10%, yellow light, slow down. Let's think about this for a minute. in a market like we're in right now, with absorption rates as ridiculously low as they are right now, with demand screaming high as it is right now, I'd take a shot if they wanted to go a little bit high. Gary says a rising market will forgive a small mistake, but not a big one. 10% or above, you're guaranteeing a price reduction. And if you want to go way higher than 10%, it may not be a good fit. I may not be the right agent for you. This is a rule of thumb that I just like you to keep in mind when you're doing these pricing conversations. If it's within 5%, green light, 5 to 10, slow down and evaluate the market and see if the market makes sense for it. 10% or above, maybe yes, maybe no. I'll be honest with you. If I had a super desirable property in a super desirable neighborhood today at a great price point, and somebody wanted to go 10% higher, 12% higher, 15% higher, I might take a shot in this market. If I was in Rutherford or Ridgewood, where absorption rate's 1 month, I'd take a shot. But I'll tell you this, I'm watching that first 3-week window, that window of opportunity. I'm looking at this at 7 days and 10 days and saying, what's happening? Am I getting action? Because if I'm not getting action, then I was just too aggressive. I got to correct fast, right? I got to correct it quickly. But I would take a shot like that in Ridgewood today. I really would, because I think that the demand is there. Rely on the absorption rate trends and your knowledge of the market to help you finesse that decision. I want to give you some visuals here, and you can take these right out of the book Shift, and you can share these with your sellers. This is what happens in a stable market if we overprice. You see point number 1 here? This is what market value is. And point number 2 is the seller saying, I want to go a little higher. I just want to try it. Sebastian, can't we just try it for a little bit? Come on, man, do me a solid. Let's try this. Okay, here's what happens. We're a little too high. Line number 3 is that activity curve. There's action, there's action, there's action. About 2 weeks or 3 weeks, it starts to drop off. And then look at line number 4. This is kind of what happens. Fair market value stays the same. The value of that house in a stable market has stayed the same. However, line number 4 here is the buyer's psychology. This is what the buyers are willing to pay. And the longer it takes to get under contract, the more the buyer psychology says there's got to be something wrong with that one. You know, if it was a good house, it would have been sold by now. Got to be something wrong with it. And even though the market value hasn't changed in a stable market, what the buyers will be willing to pay begins to decline and decline and decline. This is what happens when a home gets stigmatized because it took too long. And in a stable market, it's very frustrating for sellers because they look at the comps and they say, but that one down the street, which is just like mine, just sold. And how come they're sold and mine didn't? Because we priced it too high. And what happens now is we become stigmatized. And we've got to make these adjustments quicker, right? What eventually happens is the buyer does reduce their price, and maybe they even come down below market value begrudgingly. But by that time, if we waited too long, even below market value isn't enough because the buyer's psychology is saying it's too contaminated. There's a difference between market value and what a home will sell for. It has everything to do with how quickly does this happen. We cannot let this take too long. Here's Gary, straight out of page 142 of Shift. What a house is worth and what it sells for are different questions. The longer it takes, this is a direct quote, to sell the home, the more the market psychology reduces the amount that the buyer will pay. Sellers, not buyers, sellers will never sell for market value if their home lingers on the market too long. Never. In a shifting market, which we're not in right now, but when the markets cool off and markets slow down, here's what tends to happen. Same idea. This is fair market value. This is let's just try it a little bit higher. This is that sort of activity curve. What tends to happen in a shifting market where there's not as much demand and starting to become an oversupply is that the market value does not stay level. It starts to decline as well. And as buyers look at comps. The comps are coming lower. And as they see this house that's been on the market for a long time, their psychology is saying, wow, this isn't as good. They don't compare it to the original price. They compare it to the declining price. It's just a much worse situation because now sellers make an adjustment and they make an adjustment and they make an adjustment and they just go down and down and down and they follow it all the way to the bottom because it took too long. These are really important slides to share when you're working with buyers in different markets. So here's the way it works. We do our best CMA. We pull comps, we adjust the comps so that when we're comparing the subject property to our adjusted comps, we've really got apples to apples comparisons. We have a sense of, based on our perception of the market, based on the absorption rate, based on talking to the buyers that we're working with, and our sense of what we think. This is the art that comes with experience, but we get a gut feeling for where are we going to price it? We try to stay within that 5% curve, and then we go off to the races, and the race begins. Very first slide I shared, I think, Ben Kinney, great real estate agent, the Ben Kinney Group, the #1 group in Keller Williams, said that, selling a house, it's a beauty pageant and a horse race. And now we're off to the races. We watch the window. What is happening in this first week? What is happening in the second week? What is happening in the third week? How quickly do I need to make an adjustment? I can't wait all the way to week 4. It's too late. If I'm wrong, if I'm not getting the activity, if I'm not getting offers, I've got to adjust on day 7, day 10. We've got to move faster. National Association of Realtors stats say that if you're on the market for 2 weeks with no showings, you're overpriced. If you're on the market and you have 10 showings but no offers, you're overpriced. That's the data from NAR. And the question is, how far over? Well, Brian Eisenhauser, who is a real estate trainer now, he had been a team leader with me years ago in Keller Williams. Now he started his own real estate coaching company. His data seems to reveal that if you're only getting online views and people are driving by, but nobody's really coming in, on average, 13% too high or maybe higher. You're off by a big double-digit number. If you're getting pretty infrequent showings, you're not getting a lot of showings, you're on the market for a week, 2 weeks, you've only had 7 showings, 5 showings, you're probably off on average 8 to 10%. If you're getting showings, but nobody's stepping up to write an offer, you're probably off by about 5%. And we've got a short window of opportunity to make these corrections, right? So here's what I'll say. Do we need to call a timeout, right? Do we have anybody carrying any inventory right now? And I don't know if anybody is, that's been on the market for 30 days, 60 days, 45 days, 90 days. In the market that we're in, it is time to call a timeout and reset the game plan. We really want to get these corrections made inside of the first 7-10 days. The cost of not making the adjustment. This is Jeff's data. Average lost equity in this price range, about 13 grand lost if we're wrong. In the next price band up, about 33,000, 104,000 in the $1 million to $2 million range. Guys, this is real money. And I'm going to wind this down. I know we're running a little bit long, but I'm going to wind this down with the fact that we can't avoid the conversation. These are hard, not fun conversations. And I know they're not fun. And what happens a lot of times is when we have to give bad news, we hide a little bit. We hide, either we defer it, we just kind of hope that if I wait a couple more days, maybe a magic thing will happen and somebody will come and make a great offer. And then if I do have the conversation, I'm going to maybe just hide behind an email and send a text message and not really talk to you. Before real estate, I came out of healthcare. I worked with oncologists. I was an oncology therapist for a while, ran a hospice program for a number of years. Oncologists have to share bad news. And the sooner you can wrap your arms around the bad news, the sooner you can do something proactive to help it become good news. And we've got to be willing to just step up and have these conversations. It's kind of like being a firefighter. You got to be willing to go into the fire that everybody else wants to run out of if you're going to do the right thing. And in this instance, we're not saving the little girl, we're saving the homeowner, and we're saving the homeowner's equity. Because here's the deal. When we let people squander their home equity and take less out of their home when they sell it, we hurt them. This is data from the United States Census in 2016. And what you're looking at is the net worth of US households. The number one asset that that makes up net worth in the United States is home equity. Far and away, people do not have lots and lots of jewels and investment accounts for the most part. It's their home equity, maybe a retirement account that they've got through their work if they have one. But this is the number one asset, and we can't let them squander it, because this is the asset that they use to tap into to pay for their kids' college. This is the asset that they use to tap into to pay for mom's assisted living. We can't let people hurt themselves. That's why we're licensed, right? These are hard conversations. I get it, but they're important conversations. As a fiduciary, we have to be willing to have the hard conversation on the front end so that they do the right thing. What I said in the beginning is sales is influence. We've got to use the data and use our knowledge and our communication skills to influence people to make the right decision and take the right actions. And then if we do this and we figure out we made a mistake, then we've got to be willing to run into the fire and adjust quickly. Or else what's going to happen is people are just going to end up taking less money. And you know what? At the end of the day, that's a smaller commission check for us. Yeah, so what? It's home equity loss, which is really a big deal for folks. So I get a little fired up about this. I'm a little passionate about it, but we're going to park this bus here. Give me some takeaways today. Any ahas, any takeaways? This has been recorded. This will find its way up on the YouTube channel if you want to go back and watch some of this, or maybe look at some of these charts again. But any takeaways, any ahas for today?
The 5% rule. That was really
that Sebastian, that's big.
Can we get that chart that you were showing?
Can I get you that chart?
Yes, please.
Do me a favor. Shoot me an email later, and I can send it back.
Okay, thank you.
You can go, and I believe watch for Jeff's classes. Go to Otto, OTTEAU is how he spells his name, otto.com, and see if you can get a copy of his right pricing study there too. But yeah, those slides are slides that I want you to have, and I want you to be able to use that data with sellers, because now this is not you saying, this is what I think. No, this is data that's been comprised of thousands and thousands of New Jersey transactions. This is what it shows us, right? 5% rule is a big one. Any other ahas or takeaways? Here's the trick with the 5% rule. You gotta be pretty accurate in your own mind as to what's the right number that you're basing 5% from, which means being a hyper-local expert matters. You can't get that specifically good in every town in New Jersey. What you're going to find is you're going to dig in deep in the towns that you're focusing on. You're going to go really deep. You're going to know those markets really well. You're going to know those comps firsthand. You're going to know the tone of that market. Here's what you're going to find, guys, and this is surprising to some, but when you look at the top agents in the MLS, and I've done this data study numerous times, if you look at the top agents in the MLS that are doing the most volume, a couple things you're going to find. Number one, they don't spread themselves out across multiple markets, really. They focus deep in a couple of them. The number one agent in the Garden State MLS does 60% of her business in 1 or 2 towns only. Same thing in the New Jersey MLS. But here's the really fascinating thing. When they're doing business in the towns where they are really the kingpin, the dominant market player, where they know it really, really well, their individual statistics are amazing. List to sale retention, right up there with the very best in the industry. Days on market, right up there with the very lowest in the industry. They are rock stars in their target markets. When you take that same agent with the same skills, the same marketing plan, the same team behind them, and you have that agent take a listing in a town where they only do maybe 5% of their business, their individual performance becomes absolutely statistically average. They're only rock stars in their market. That, when I first saw that, changed everything for me, because what it really got me to think is, look, it really is hyper-local. I've got to be the hyper-local expert because I can't perform the same way in a market that I don't know about. I just can't. And it's really amazing to see that, but it happens again and again and again. Names that you know that are just legendary. You take them out of their primary town and they list a home from a college friend who's in a town that they don't do business with. Their performance numbers look absolutely statistically average. It's amazing. Anything else before we wrap up? All right. If there's not, I'm going to let you guys roll. This will be recorded. This will find its way up onto the Bergen Partners YouTube channel shortly. The thing I'm just going to throw out there is this. Go back and watch this from time to time. Some of these concepts, especially adjusting comps, especially the 5% rule, a lot of these things take a couple of laps through. If you need some help with the CMA or trying to think about pricing, just jump on an office hour, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 3 to 4. I'm always there to answer questions, always happy to help you think about this stuff. But when we get it right, it is amazing. When we get it wrong, you know, folks' equity takes a big hit, and that's just not something that as a fiduciary we can let happen.